This is California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerantz. We are coming to you from the nation's capital, Washington, D.C. We're inside the Cannon House office building, and joining us today is Jerry McNerney. He is a member of the U.S. Congress representing the Delta. And I want to speak with you about the Delta. I've recently spoken with the Secretary of Natural Resources for the state of California, John Laird. He's a big proponent of what's known as the Bay Area Delta Conservation Plan. I know that 3 members of Congress, yourself, Mr. Garamendi, and one other whose name escapes me, has some real serious concerns about the conservation plan. Talk to us about it.
Well, actually, there's more than 3 that have a concern about it. Basically, there is the Bay is the most valuable estuary in the West Coast. In fact, the western United States, west of the Mississippi River, and it's a jewel. It has its own ecosystem. And it's a tremendous resource for the community. It's a tremendous resource for California and for the western part of the country.
No doubt. And the question is, when we look at the Delta, so much of California relies on the Delta. If the Delta became unusable for whatever reason, earthquake, whatever it may be, Southern California would be dry. 25 million individuals would be without water. And so what Mr. Brown is saying, the governor, is he wants to create these tunnels under the Delta to create increased water flow regardless of natural disaster. Tell us your concerns. I want to hear them.
Well, what the governor is proposing is 2 very large tunnels with a tremendous capacity to take water under the Delta to point south of the Delta. Now, if you look at the capacity that's being installed, it would be enough to divert the whole Sacramento River around the Delta. And the Sacramento River is the major water source for the Delta. So what would happen if that plan succeeds, and if those tunnels are used the way they're designed, is that the Delta would fill up with salt water from the ocean.
A disaster.
It would be an economic disaster for our communities. It would be an environmental disaster. Many species would go extinct. The fishing on the coast would be devastated. Farmers would be devastated.
Would that happen as a result of a natural disaster where the seawater would come rushing into the Delta?
Well, that's a good point. And what I'd like to say is that if they put the tunnels in, our fear is that they would ignore the risk to the Delta from the levee, the aging levees. And so it's very important, no matter what happens, to take care of the levees, to strengthen the levees, to re-engineer the levees so that they are going to be there. Because if they break, we have potential of Stockton flooding, potential of Modesto flooding, potential of Sacramento flooding. It would be a disaster much larger than Hurricane Katrina.
Now, what's interesting is a lot of Californians get confused between the Delta plan and the water bond, which is a completely separate issue going to the voters maybe in November 2014. That is supposed to address the issue of the levees. But again, we don't know if there's going to be a bill that gets out into an initiative that will be presented to the voters. So there's so much going on. Where do we go from here as a result?
Well, I think the thing to think about is back initially when the Bay Delta Conservation Plan was begun, there were 2 competing and equal goals. One is reliability of water shipments, and the other is the health of the Delta. Now, if you look at those 2 requirements, by reliability, you mean that as the same amount of water can be shipped no matter what conditions are occurring on the surface. In other words, is it a dry year or a wet year? Then if you're going to require the same amount of water under any conditions, then the health of the Delta cannot withstand that.
He is Jerry McNerney, a member of the U.S. Congress representing the Delta. My name is Brad Pomerantz. You've been watching California Edition.